Welcome to Dusty Little Wastelanders, Chapter 14, Return Home. I walked through the streets of Hillville, a scorched mansion and the rampant dust NATO at my back, my brother, my treasure, my accomplishment, cradled in my arms. He was weak but capable of walking. I refused his offers and carried him back to the bar. It had to be done right. The streets of Hillville were devastated. Some folks had moved on from where they'd been when I first went into the matter, and others still mourned the loss. My steps had to take more care in this pass around. With Kyle in my arms, I aimed to make it less of a bumpy ride. My boots avoided wrecked shanty walls rather than stomp all over them. My eyes had to watch the floor and avoid tripping over any trivial spillings. Kyle's head wiggled in my grip. He was taking it all in. I wondered if he'd ever seen this side of town. When we were one building away from the bar, I was attacked by anxiety. I don't know why, but my knees shook and my mind raced and my throat clogged. I stopped before passing by the bar. I steadied my breath and pressed on. The front of the bar was still boarded up, so I had to walk Kyle around through the back. I came back through the back door unnoticed at first. They'd cleaned up the rubble, which was a godsend for navigating with a man in my arms. The posse was sharing a table in the dining section. They had their backs turned to the bar and their backs turned to me. The thoughts racing through my mind deafened the sounds of their conversation. TM was the first to turn. His face lit up with a child's innocence, like when their parent comes home from work. The tears were on his face before he could start running. Kyle's face lit up some when he saw little TM too. It was heartwarming. TM anacondaed my leg, rubbed his face against my knee, and spread his love. I could tell Kyle was getting anxious. I let him down, and he and TM were in each other's arms in an instant. But I'll still remember who TM ran to first. The others had noticed TM's actions and stood back watching with warmed expressions. "All right," Donald fussed. "TM's hogged enough of the welcome back hugs." Donald was crying too, tears of joy. Donald never struck me as the emotional type. He ran to Kyle with open arms. He was going to give Kyle a hug, even if he had to make a TM sandwich in the process, which he did. TM clung on to Kyle and was surprised when Donald's belly bumped against him. Donald and Kyle clenched each other with silent, tear-filled joy. The old posse had reunited. It was time for Kyle to meet the new members. I hadn't noticed till I looked back at them, but TJ had joined them at the bar. I was relieved to see that he'd escaped the storm. This was our first meeting since the botched rescue mission. It was going to be awkward, but I didn't know that I fully blamed him for what had happened. And it was water under the bridge now. I got Kyle back. "Mr. Williams?" Kyle called to Esther. "You remember?" Esther approached with open arms. "Of course," Kyle responded. "You recognize him?" I asked. "Of course," Kyle repeated. "I'm so glad we got you back," Esther claimed as he squeezed the love back into Kyle. "And you," Kyle pointed to TJ. "You're Tortoise's son." "I am." TJ came in for a hug. "How'd you figure all that out?" I asked, jealous of his deductions. "They're just alike," Kyle responded. I looked at him, still puzzled. "They're both the spitting images of each other," he clarified, and TJ shared some love. K2 was the only one left, the only one unrecognized. He twiddled his thumbs nervously, out of place, his pale face turned as red as his hair. "This is K2, Kyle," I introduced them. K2 spread a wide grin following his introduction and eventual inclusion. "K2?" Kyle questions. "Let me guess. Your name is Kyle too?" K2 nodded, still nervously, keeping his distance. "Well, bring it in here, name-sharer." K2 came in for a hug too. "Did Enry tell you about my old school friend?" Kyle asked K2 as he joined the pile-up. "No." K2 shook his head. "I had a friend named Kyle back in grade school, only he refused to ever call him Kyle. He said there was only room enough for one Kyle in his life," Kyle recalled. "What did he call him?" K2 asked. "Kyle's friend," Kyle answered. "It's good to know some things never change." We'd all been introduced and squeezed life back into Kyle, for the most part anyway. I knew there was far to go before we got Kyle back, if Kyle ever came back. We walked up to the tables in the dining area. Esther, K2, and TJ put enough tables together to seat all of us. The day had drained us all, but our accomplishments were uplifting. The silence was welcomed. The ambience was something we all needed to take in for a moment. I looked over the beaten-down bar. They'd even brushed out most of the dust. They'd kept plenty busy in my absence. "Positive change," Kyle blurted out. "What?" I asked. "All these people you've affected, Enry," Kyle said. "You've kept spreading a positive change, even in my absence." "Oh, no, Kyle," I corrected. "They've been affecting me with positive change. They taught me the value in it." "You've always spread positive change, Enry," Kyle corrected. "I'm just glad you finally found some people who helped you come around to it. We all know I tried, to no avail." Kyle faked a smile with his forced attempt to remain himself, but his smile wasn't Mom's. "Can we get some water and a light meal for Kyle, please?" I asked. "I'll see what I can fix up that isn't buried in dust." Esther went back behind the bar to throw something together. "What happened to McDougal's manor?" Donald asked. "Burned down, far as I know," I scoffed. "If McDougal didn't burn down with it, then I'll stick around long enough to see my revenge." "Revenge?" Kyle asked. "No, Mr. McDougal isn't that bad." Isn't that bad? I about fell out of my chair. Why do you defend a slaving bastard? Yeah, he is a slaver, Kyle moped, but he isn't that bad. He treated me just fine. Fine? I was fuming. He was the only one on that plantation who treated me like a human. I think he just enjoys intelligent conversation, something I provided an ample supply of. But it was the guards and the other slaves that abused me. The guards abused everyone. Kyle ran his hand through his patchy head of hair. They said I had pretty hair and would pull a chunk out of it at random. He then flashed the bite marks on his arm. Mr. McDougal showed me special favors, which made the other slaves jealous. They'd hold me down and tell me it was time for lunch, at which point the other slaves would come in for a taste. Stop it, please, I begged. I can't listen to this. I walked outside for some fresh air. Donald was close behind. Revenge? Really, Enry? Donald scolded. They hurt my brother in a way that I can't fix, I lashed back. Exactly, Donald agreed. So then why do you think that killing a millionaire, and most likely yourself in the process, will fix anything? Donald pointed his finger back to Kyle. An act of the Lord Hickafu himself destroyed the one obstacle between you and your brother. Now you've got him back. What he needs is you. For once, you make sense, I said. I'll have to find a way to quench my thirst for revenge in different avenues. That still doesn't sound healthy, Donald said, but at least you realize where you're needed. I returned to the bar. We celebrated Kyle's homecoming from that point on. TM showed off his pictures to Kyle. Kyle loved them. That's our difference. I judged them. Kyle loved them. TM had even drawn a new picture that I hadn't seen yet. It depicted Kyle on the night of the kidnapping. Kyle knelt beside a break in Moontown's border. He'd instructed TM to squeeze between the gap. Kyle packed it with rocks to shield TM from detection. Kyle was drawn with a halo and angel wings. I wonder if TM might give me horns and bat wings. But there was a man behind Kyle in the picture, his future captor. After having hid TM, Kyle ran back to the inn to help Donald and me. That's when he got nabbed. One picture sparked this whole story. I didn't count, but I'd say it was good for 1,000 words. The stories of misadventures filled the night. I tried to avoid the more tortured stories, but it was healthy to speak about them. I sat with Kyle to my left and TJ to my right. I could get the feeling TJ was getting closer with each story told. He was itching to talk, and I wasn't sure I wanted to scratch that itch. We'd filled Kyle in on most of what he'd missed up to the botched rescue. It was finally time to address the thing that broke me. I'm sorry for what happened, Enry, TJ finally blurted out. I was in over my head and just wanted so much to help you. What happened? Kyle asked. I took a swig of water and started the story. We spoke of the planning stages, the past fiasco, and the botched plan. TJ was sweating beads as I retold the story. I was surprised at how well I handled revisiting the mistake. Kyle's face at my side kept me cool. The recent events had reduced the botched rescue to a laughing matter. I read the room. Everyone wanted to laugh, but were afraid to do so. It's okay to laugh. It serves as proof that you've grown past your mistakes. I concluded my speech and joined the laughter. I couldn't believe I'd been reduced to quoting Richard McDougal. TJ laughed the comfort back onto his face. The experience had changed us all, Kyle the most, but it felt right to try and be normal for a while. The conversation fizzled and the sun peeked out after the storm had passed through. I could tell all this activity had drained Kyle's already exasperated self. I'd gotten a few cups of water in him, along with a hearty batch of toast. These were my primary concerns. So I chose to take our leave for a moment. There were no rooms on the ground level, so Kyle and I had to take the broken stairs. The guys had to set up a few planks as a makeshift ramp, bridging the gap between the floor and the end of the stairs. I stuck close behind Kyle and guided him up the ramp while I traversed the wobbly stabilizers as well. We were up the ramp and to the second floor accident-free, which was a victory. I guided Kyle to the furthest left door. There are 3 rooms in the inn, and I knew ours had been blown apart. I wasn't for sure of the state of K2's room, so I took Kyle to the vacant room. We swung the door open and faced an intact room. The room needed cleaning. It may have been the only room left standing from the dustnado, but it hadn't avoided a thorough dust sprinkle. Kyle's face glistened all over the amenities. The bed, a desk, and a window were like a house, a stable, and a view when compared to what Kyle had become used to. Hell, I'd even bet the wooden chair set up at my desk would beat most anything he had on McDougal's manor. He threw himself onto the bed without a moment's thought. Hey there, what's up? LL Smith here. Thank you so much for enjoying my audiobook. I'm going to interrupt you real quick and say, if you get real anxious to hear what happens next and just can't wait till next week, or if you get the urge to just support such a stunning, ruggedly handsome, and awesome independent creator such as myself, I encourage you highly to go follow the link in the description and support the official release. Thank you so much for listening, and let's jump right back into that story. I watched him fluff the pillows and roll all around the bed like a new puppy marking his territory. I cringed at the dust clouds he stirred up in doing so, but dared not interrupt his moment. Eventually I grinned at the sight of it. Kyle sat up on the bed, his eyes absorbed his full surroundings. His blue eyes found me once more. They were full of water. He was crying again. Thank you. I wasn't sure you'd... I didn't trust that... I'm sorry. Kyle stumbled all over himself. I sat next to him and stopped him with a hand wave. Don't apologize to me, I asserted. Not for anything, ever. It saddens me to know that you doubted me, but it was a reasonable thought. After all, I doubted myself. But you still came. Kyle wrapped his arms around my shoulder. Of course, I joined his embrace. We shared another moment in silence. Kyle's cold and bony grasp was uncomfortable. I had to work to hide my discomfort. I should never feel uncomfortable in the arms of my brother, but it lacked all his humanity. It was like having a tin wire wrapped around me. I patted his back and gave every signal short of letting go to help cue the disengagement. He eventually did let go. I rose from the bed and went to the floor. You should get some rest, I instructed. You look ragged. Please don't leave, Kyle begged. I shut the door on command. I can't sleep alone. It's okay, Kyle. I get it. I pulled up a chair from the desk and set it up beside the bed. I'll be right here the whole time. Kyle smiled, that same unfamiliar, damaged, and forced smile. How I yearned to have Mom smile back. Kyle burrowed in the comforter and turned over. That's all it took, and he was out. I found myself fading in and out of slumberland. I wanted to have this damaged body of mine looked over by a medical expert, but I was needed here. My dust suit covered my whole body and soaked up all my blood like a sponge. I reckon Kyle didn't know the condition I was in, outside of my face, of course. Cut, burnt, and broken. Name it, and my face featured it. I pressed lightly against my nose, and even the most gentle of finger prods felt like a hammer strike. My body was sore with the glass shards and bruises that sewn all over it. All in all, though, wasn't a bad run. I'd saved K2, got my brother back, and refrained from dying or sustaining major bodily harm. Gotta take what you can get in these situations. End of chapter 14.